All right, good morning, Trailblazers. Welcome to Deliver Empathetic and Joyful User Experiences with Salesforce. And I just wanted to start with the why for this session. We're hearing a lot about the agentic era and the enterprise, and I'm very focused on the human heartbeat of technology. I think our users deserve the best experiences because we want them to be productive and happy and to get more meaning in actionable data and insights, so that they can focus more time on the talents that they bring to the world and for more meaningful human interactions. So for today, I thought we would first ground in what do we mean by being inclusive and intentional with change management. We'll unpack a little bit about empathy and joy and how does that play into this. Then I'll walk us through, for example, a typical project lifecycle where we'll do practical ways to empower and delight our users along the way. I'll go over briefly just categories of Salesforce features that enhance the user experience. And then I thought we would wrap up with possible outcomes and resources, including I created a custom trail mix on Trailhead so you can continue the learning and then leave time for Q&A. And I'm also happy, after the session to hang out and answer questions as well. So when you see this, I know it's early in the morning, but I always find that these sessions can be enriched by all the experience you all have out in the audience as well. So I'm always happy to share what I know, but also there's a lot of wisdom in this room. So you'll see these prompts where you can just shout out an answer and I'll repeat back what I hear and weave it into the talk track. I'm Daniel Gorton. I am a principal strategist and Salesforce architect in the solo business I have, GHG Holistic Solutions. And I'd like to have this picture here of Logan Airport because I think it's a great reminder for me of I like to look at the holistic view and picture, but then there's a lot of details it takes to land successful outcomes on that runway. So I've been at the intersection of people, data, and tech and missions for 20 years, nonprofits for 20 years, and these are some of the areas that I'm passionate about. So I love to connect and hear from you. I love Trailblazer stories. I'm also on the planning committee for Dreaming in Data, which is the Salesforce Community Run Conference coming up in Chicago in May. And I'm always a lifelong learner. There's just way too much happening at a fast pace that it keeps me humble and curious and learning with all of you. So let's first ground user experiences in inclusion and being intentional with the change management that we have. Okay, so this is the first shout out moment. What are some ways that you feel that we can be inclusive and intentional with change management? And again, you can just shout it out. I'll repeat back if people can't hear it. So inclusion and intentionality. What comes to mind? Accessibility.
Acknowledge that we're asking people to change.
Acknowledge that we're asking people to change. There's a lot of change we're asking people to do. Inviting your business unit partners to participate. I love that. Empathize what's in it for you. Grounding all of this in the people. And so you'll see here, you've hit on a lot of this. This is about considering all of the people involved at your organization and with technology. And I know it can be a lot of different voices, but the point here is that we want to make sure there's representation across the organization. So that might be different business units. It might be people who are on the front lines, for example, of fundraising in a nonprofit or doing the program management. And out of that, we can start to identify the personas. So personas are characteristics of groups of people that probably share similar motivations or needs out of a system like Salesforce. And out of that, you can literally start to define their roles within the system. So who are the different people within your organization? It could be a fundraising manager. It can be someone that's in finance, program delivery, and sales. But we also want to ground in different learning styles and needs. Some people like to be hands-on the keyboard. They like to read ahead, like to visualize, like to hear. Maybe it's tactical. There's just different styles that people have, and making sure that we're including that in, because then that helps us incorporate accessibility. And accessibility benefits all of us, that when the systems that are designed enable everyone to participate and be part of it, That's where you start to get the empathy and the joy out of it. And then I love working with people who have a variety of different comfort and experience levels with technology. So I've had a lot of fun with people who maybe hate tech, or their passion is for something completely non-technical, to super users and everyone in between. And so I think the more we understand the different comfort and experience levels people have, the more we can be inclusive in our design. And then being intentional is about prioritizing change management. And I have been on many projects where sometimes that can be sort of an afterthought, but when we can infuse elements of this into what we're doing, we're grounding ourselves in the humans that are involved. So that might be convening a governance group. So whether that's, for example, I've had, business partners. So one person per business unit, a subject matter expert in the room. And we're talking about what's going on in their business. We're talking about what's happening within the system, that's bringing them joy or requests that they have. In that we're doing that to create a shared vision together. I've been in organizations where maybe Salesforce starts as the tool for one department and it gets expanded out. And now it's become for the entire organization. So we have to have that shared vision together where we want this to go. And certainly leadership support is important. I would say I haven't seen it be successful if it's just a top-down mandate, like we need to do this, just do it. I think leaders can help unblock, set the vision with the team, and provide the resources and the importance of everything being part of the system that we're trying to build together. And it's really important to help reduce the silos. The systems will have a tendency to repeat the silos within the organization if we let it be. So we want to find ways to figure out where are some of those blockers happening. You've all said, you want to invite those key stakeholders and the super users and everyone in between in that process. I also, though, like to be transparent and set realistic expectations. There's only so much we can do for a go live, only so much we can do at a period of time. There's finite resources, and so we'll talk about some ways that we can make sure users understand where we're at, provide the feedback, and then know, if we're not right now addressing something, why that is, and then they always have the ability to give more feedback into it. So then empathy and joy. So user experience is just to ground us. I'm talking about the holistic experience. It is the user interface, and we'll get into examples of why that's important and what we have available to us. But I'm talking about the holistic experience, and I like this visual here of the tree. You got the roots and the branches and the leaves and bugs and who knows, sunlight, everything going through there. But really thinking of the whole human experience here. So yes, what they go through with screens within Salesforce, but also the data that we're asking them to put in and want to give back to them. How are we helping train people and give input into the process? We'll have examples of that. And we want to understand everyone's goals and motivation. Again, I believe that the people who are using systems like Salesforce come with other talents and abilities that they're trying to unleash and unlock within their organizations. And so our goal is to understand that so that we can design the system in a way that we get their feedback and it's really meaningful for them and having input throughout that process, which we'll get into. And then with empathy, I like that "how are you doing really" there up on the building. This is understanding people's needs and feelings and goals involved, and it helps ground us in those collaborative working partnerships to understand where people are coming from and what they're looking for out of using Salesforce. And I'm mindful, we heard this, people are going through lots of change, within their communities, within their organizations, within their lives, within the world, and with tech fiercely innovating at a fast pace. And so users tend to wear a lot of hats, and being mindful of that when we bring them also into technology projects will help us ground in what's going on in their lives outside of implementing and evolving with Salesforce. But I like to stay humble and curious. The longer I'm in this ecosystem, over 10 years now, the more I realize I don't know. And that's actually something that's humbling. It keeps me curious, with audiences like you all. You all bring a lot of your wisdom and experiences in, and I learn so much from that as well. And users have taught me a lot along the way. If I observe what they're doing or they show me a better way of doing it, it's not just a technological approach. I want to understand what is it with them and their experience that we can all learn from. But I'll tell you from the hard way that being very empathetic means there can be burnout if I'm not prioritizing or we're not prioritizing some self-care. So some ways to do that, get away from the keyboard. I have to remind myself often of that. It's those expectations you're setting also help provide some boundaries and guardrails. So I'm not over-promising to people and get in situations where there's just too much happening at once. So shout out. This doesn't have to just be tech. This could be, in line somewhere, a travel experience. What are some joyful experiences you've had, like recently? Maybe it could be at this conference. And what was it that made it joyful for you? So it can be tech. And I'll just give you a quick example of a non-tech. I don't know, I was in a community in that there was a drive-through opportunity for a pharmacy, right? I was long time, 30-minute lines. And when I saw that there was that ability to sometimes choose that as an option, and it was a 2-minute interaction instead of 30, that was a delightful surprise. So what other examples do you have?
Okay, this is ridiculous. All of a sudden, my phone started to copy verification codes from my email and not just text messages. And I was so happy about that.
Yep. So we heard Zen moments in Salesforce homepage. We heard some joy within multiple verification codes.
We do have our own website, and for students to submit cloud applications, they click submit, little confetti pops up.
Confetti.
So they can click to add more confetti endlessly. They're clicking it, and it becomes all that.
Yeah, I think I would just be stuck in that loop, clicking that all day long. And
I think they click numbers in the skyline. So.
oh wow, you're tracking the click of that. That's amazing. That there was actually human at the other end of the line providing support. That's one of my things. I'm all for where AI can come in and people can choose that. But I've been on systems where I didn't even know I was talking to AI. I kind of could tell because there were some pauses, so that wasn't as joyful. But then there was one system where when I asked to speak to a human, it actually hung up the phone. So that might be over in the agentic era. Leave space for the human interactions with people. And so joyful. I love this image here. We're delighting people. I really believe in this. I want people to have more time back for what they find joyful. If they're a fundraiser, they're finance, they're connecting with their donors and people and being out there, and they're a marketer, they love data, whatever that is, the point here is to give them more time back for that. And it's all about adding value to people's lives. We want to make people's lives better. And we heard examples of good surprises here. Not the ones where you're like, oh, that wasn't so great, but wow, that took 1/10 of the time I thought it was. And we can design the user experience to be intuitive, and we'll get into examples of that, so that people aren't guessing. Long gone are the days when I used to write these 40 to 50, 100-page user manuals or technical guides. Within the user experience, we can help guide people. And I'm hugely passionate about fewer clicks. So whether it's through automation tools, I'll give you an example. And I know I mentioned it later, but I love quick action buttons. So instead of people hitting the new button on an opportunity and seeing 150 fields, I like just, if they click the new grant button, it's going to ask them 4 questions, 4 fields they need to fill out now. And because we know what button they clicked, there's fewer things I need to ask them, and I can set automatically. That's what we're talking about, but also helpful guidance along the way, whether that's the help text, the path feature in Salesforce. You're making it so that people aren't guessing what's expected of them and what the next step is there. And I do believe this, even for those where technology, they're just like, it's just not for me. There are ways, though, that as we're going through now, that we can make this fun and empowering for people. I do believe in that, and I've seen examples of that, and we'll go over that. So now let's walk through, an example of whether we're implementing Salesforce for the first time or we're going to that next iteration on our roadmap. what are practical ways that we can delight and empower users? So if we start with strategy, this is iterating on the change management piece. So starting and grounding ourselves. I love this image of the mountain where, we can celebrate that we're up on that mountain. We see that there's more to go, but giving people a sense of where we're going, that shared vision we mentioned and values, whether you use something like Salesforce's V2 MOM or some other type of approach to ground your team and what is it that we're all trying to achieve here together. And it's okay, you're going to have different needs across the department, but there should be a unifying line through that. And that's where your business subject matter experts can come in. They can help you understand. I don't know the business as well as they do. I put the trust in what they need, and my role at the intersection of people and tech is to unlock what they want and to facilitate what's possible with the technology. And I love being on focus groups. I've been invited where I was a fly on the wall, and people were pretty brutally honest about what they did and didn't enjoy about the instance we had with Salesforce. Nothing to take personal. I learned a lot from what it was that was adding time and just making everything miserable, and what opportunities we could do to actually turn around that sentiment and make the system experiences fun for people. But please don't forget about the data strategy, especially since we're in the AI era and it relies on data. Organizations, but if we ground them in the outcomes, like what are the key business questions that we have, then we can start to think of what data is important, especially when we go from data migration to data migration. There are opportunities there to cut down on the fields or the records that just are no longer adding the value. But this is also about roadmap and phases. Again, we can only do so much in a period of time that we have. So, and that's okay. Your roadmap will evolve as the business evolves. Nonprofits, for example, right now are always going through a lot. So what you might set out for your roadmap needs to change, but at least you have an understanding of, a little bit of further ahead where we're heading together. But as much as I love the business and the human side, I do also want to be mindful of the technical. We're in a lot of release cycles with Salesforce, a lot of innovations coming out. There are other systems within our organizations that Salesforce is part of, and understanding that. But for me, it really is about, okay, let's see Mount Everest and how we build those bridges together from old to new. And then I love the pebble here for the design pieces and helping discover. This is really about solving for business users. So the importance of business analysis. I have been on projects where I was shocked that there wasn't any business analysis, big projects. And I think it's a missed opportunity because we're really trying to understand what is it that our users are going through and need to do, and then how can we understand how the system can help them there. I am a believer in the user story format, although someone reminded me that it's also about the narrative, though, of what the users are going through, not just as a fundraiser, I would like to be able to understand who gave double their donation this year so that I can especially acknowledge them. That's an example of a user story. And with it comes that criteria that helps us test and understand, are we delivering what the users are asking for? Again, that bullet point might be a little redundant, but we are still centering on the humans throughout all of this. So I just put that in there just to remind us that, it's about the human needs here. But again, back to realistic expectations and scope. I've been on a lot of projects where a lot can be promised in the beginning and we're just learning what people need. And so just being mindful that as we build the system out, we want to set realistic expectations of what we're going to accomplish together. I'd rather deliver fewer with better quality than just promise everything out in the world. And it's very tempting to cram it all into go live. But that last bullet point there, the context of the organization. I've been in organizations where they're going through 3, 4 major changes, including 2 technology changes all at once. And the same people were involved in all of those changes. So you can imagine how overwhelming that was for them. And maybe it wasn't the best time to implement or move on the Salesforce platform right then and there. Maybe it should have been in phases. So just learning from what's happening within the organization. And my biggest question is, why now? We've been thinking about this. What is it about this moment in time that makes this important? And then building and testing, with the blocks there, we're prioritizing the user stories. When I meet with my business partners, they help set the priorities. They know what would be important first or second. And, it's really about when you have that governance group, you're going to hear lots of thoughts about what should be done now versus later. We're going to try to cram a lot in. But that's again where we can sort of negotiate. I mean, I've been with business partners where we've shown that like what this other department needs is actually gonna help benefit you too. So if we can prioritize one of their asks along with one of yours together, you're actually gonna have a better experience with what we're all trying to do at Salesforce. But sprints, just a way to organize your work maybe in 2-week buckets of time, just sort of, again, keeping, what you're promising to do. And then feedback along the way. I believe training is, you'll see in a later slide, it doesn't have to be at the end of the project. If you're involving users throughout, they're building with you. And so it's not quite the surprise or shock of go live of, hey, now it's your turn, go ahead and catch up on all the learning. They've been part of it along the way. They're helping test the system. I have been on projects where maybe there was sign off not to do the user acceptance testing, and I believe that's really important, for users to get that opportunity. But back to diversity, if I'm only inviting a few people to test the system, maybe I'm not uncovering everything that might be happening that someone might have a perspective of that's gonna help us before we go further in the process and it gets more expensive. They can help us catch it sooner. I might skip some of these prompts in just interest of time and also leaving time for Q&A. So training, this is about making training fun and memorable. Shout out to Reby de la Paz, who in a Dreamforce session had an amazing session about how to ground change in people. And so from that, gave me this idea. It's a little bit further down on the bullet points about let's demo this. Let's try it out together with your laptops, for example, and then we're gonna have fun like Trailhead. And so I'll give you an example. Early in my career, I built out a timesheet object to save from paper, and management's in one meeting, the rest of us are all in another, and we're showing everyone. We had a fun quiz game, and everyone's just having fun. Putting in timesheet records in Salesforce. I mean, management was like, what is happening in that what were you doing? It's like we were just showing people how to have fun with Salesforce. So I do believe that we can ground training. And I think that's why, for example, you're on Trailhead and they quiz. It's to help you reinforce the learning that you're having. But back to the audience, what are the needs people have? How do we design this training in a way that, where I usually prefer bite size. Long gone for me are usually the all day, 4-day, 5-day trainings. Certainly that can work for some organizations, but I like to give people bite-sized pieces of information. They can digest it, they can try it out, and then come back for the next module is typically sort of where I lean these days. You can embed in Salesforce. So again, it doesn't have to be, they have to exit out of Salesforce and go consult a user manual. They're seeing help bubbles to know what to put in that field. They're seeing, the path feature that I mentioned earlier to know where they are at in that opportunity. They're using your dynamic, forms and actions so that people within that moment know what's expected of them. So the training can be built within, not just a separate event as well. And an easy thing to do is to offer open office hours. There could be 30 minutes, an hour, people just drop in casually, there's no agenda. They ask any questions they want. We can show them, bring up Salesforce Live, and kind of go through questions that they're having. And I learned a lot from users through that as well. Michelle, you're right here in the audience. Love everything you've done with documentation. It's really important. And if you're gonna document anything, make sure you're definitely doing the how, but more importantly, in my opinion, the why. Why did you choose that solution now? What was going on in the organization? What was happening, within the Salesforce platform that you chose that so that your future self and those that are working on the system can thank you too. And then feedback and requests. So I've used everything from the cases object in Salesforce to different forms that people have. And this is about that continuous improvement. And this also helps people understand that, okay, I've heard you. You have a bug, you have a question, you have an idea. You can transparently see that in the queue and where it's at. You can vote on that. You can provide input about how to prioritize that. It's really their system, not my system. And so this is again, though, where governance or an advisory group of leaders can help, represent with what their business stakeholders need and look through the requests and help prioritize them together. And this helps with the transparency and honesty that we were talking about, so people understand. I mean, I gave feedback, I've never heard anything more about it. And so I think it's very important to give people that information back. But I always like to say, don't forget about small wins. There may be something that is just maybe not the highest value, but it would add joy to people's lives. Could be rolling out, more examples of the confetti or just the delightful little reminders that we heard about in the audience. But when I'm thinking about what we can do in a period of time, I'm also thinking about what's happening within the system. So leaving time for, yep, there's a release coming up. We want to prepare for that. Okay, and these are categories of Salesforce features. There's whole sessions that you can get into. I also have a trail mix, a custom trail mix that we link to, and I'll show you in a moment, where you can dive into these features that are coming out and that are already out. So enhancing the user experience, Lightning's been out a while, and I was part of the Lightning Champion program, and what I appreciated about what Salesforce did there is it wasn't just a lift and shift of what was in Classic. They were thinking of how do we take a feature and evolve it and add more productivity through Path, this better branding. We have the dynamic forms, actions, and related lists. I mean, they're really neat ways to give people what they need in the context, in the moment now, and to design those better experiences where they're not looking at a page layout with hundreds of fields. And I already mentioned the example of the quick action buttons. Again, you don't have to be staring at a new record with lots of fields. We're going to ask you the 4 or 5 fields now. And then as that record moves along, we can surface back up additional questions. You already heard about help text. But a big one I don't see a lot of organizations getting to as quickly as they might want to is giving people their data back. So I love the Unified Analytics tab, but I've embedded dashboards or reports or charts right within record pages so that people don't have to exit their workflow when they're on an account, for example, and want to summarize the giving history by year and by maybe type of revenue or line of business. I mean, it's right there. They can click on an element. They're brought into the report, already drilled by that, down by that account, and by what it is that they clicked on. So again, that's helping get the data back in the hands of people. We're asking them to put so much information in. And so we want to empower them with that back. And that helps reinforce better data quality because people are getting the information back. I've also had dashboards that literally been brought up in front of team meetings, and usually there's a data quality dashboard they check first where we're hoping everything's all zeros for issues to fix. So they go look at that, everything's good. They make sure they put their data in before that monthly staff meeting, and then they all get to celebrate and see that dashboard up on the screen and be able to speak to the data and the efforts that they've been doing with their teams. We're all here hearing a lot about Agentforce. There's a lot of amazing automation tools. I'm just really impressed with what I see, for example, with reactive screen flows to be able to, again, as people are putting information in, offer those dynamic experiences. So again, there's fewer clicks involved. So I'm going to skip that prompt, and I want to get into why all of this. What are some of those possible outcomes that we would have if we lead with empathetic and joyful user experiences? So we're talking about maximizing value here. I do believe by doing this, we're giving people more time back, like I've mentioned. I want people to be able to apply the gifts. They want to spend more time on the human interactions and not being always diverted away from that potential. The systems they're using, they've been part of, they've helped build, they've helped shape it, they've helped provide feedback into where that's headed, so they actually want to use it. I think that's the key part here. And you have better collaboration because people have that vision together. They're on the same page and they're bringing their different experiences that they have. You've heard throughout, fewer clicks to get at and enter information and give it back. Every click saved adds up time and gives people that information back. I'm huge. If we're going to automate, it's the mundane I'm thinking about. What are those tasks that people are doing that just takes way too many clicks, way too much time, and so that they're able to get back what they need and focus more on what they're doing. And we've heard about accessibility here too. So we're scaling this. We're making sure that the systems are thinking about how we make it available for the future as we continue to grow. So go ahead and grab that QR code if you want. And the slides for the session are already in the event app. And so these links here are all clickable, but you're all here at this event. This is a huge way to learn. Huge shout out for the dreaming events, the Salesforce community run conferences. They're such a wonderful way to collaborate and continue to learning together. I love the Salesforce admin blog. Specifically, they have that Salesforce admin by walking around. That's what that acronym stands for. So getting to understand from your users' experiences. And then whether taking these certifications is on your roadmap or not, there's a plethora, there's a ton of resources, and I've linked to some of those modules within my trail mix there on the user experience and strategy designer certification trails. There's a ton about human-centered design there. And then I give a shout out, I love Jody Herbeck's book, Rock Your Role Like a Salesforce Admin, to go from being, order taker to you are thoughtful leaders and partners in your organization. You're helping shape and understand what your users need and how you're delivering that value to them. But that code here, the QR code, will take you to a trail mix of modules that I've seen on Trailhead that will help you dive deeper into the concepts. Because I know hearing about the concepts and example is one thing, but being able to apply that learning in your organizations. And so the trail mix is a great way, better job than I can do for you to go and ground yourself in additional learning there. So thank you. I really appreciate you all being here. I know there's lots of sessions you can attend. Thank you for staying with the human heartbeat of technology.